Have you ever felt like someone close to you is just a little too distant, or perhaps just a little too critical? Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones whose subtle actions and words can leave us questioning everything we thought we knew about the relationship. They don't always show their true feelings directly, but beneath the surface, there may be something deeper, something far more troubling. What if I told you that these subtle signs could indicate that someone close to you secretly harbors feelings of resentment or hatred toward you? Let's explore the 8 key signs that could reveal these hidden emotions, often disguised behind smiles, compliments, and casual conversations. The human psyche is not a single unified force, but a landscape of contrasting energies, some conscious, some hidden beneath the surface. Among the most misunderstood elements of this inner terrain is what we call the shadow. This is the part of the self that contains all the thoughts, emotions, impulses, and instincts we deem unacceptable or undesirable. It is not inherently evil or wrong, but it is cast out of awareness because it does not align with the image we wish to present to ourselves or to others. Within this shadow lie the roots of hidden animosity, the kind that festers silently even toward those closest to us. When someone close to you secretly hates you, this hatred is rarely recognized consciously by that person. Instead, it is buried, repressed, and pushed down into the unconscious. But what has been pushed down does not disappear. It seeks expression in distorted, symbolic, or projected forms. This is where the concept of projection comes into play. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism in which a person attributes their own unacceptable feelings or traits to someone else. If an individual is harboring jealousy, bitterness, or resentment, but cannot accept these emotions within themselves, they may begin to perceive you as arrogant, selfish, or manipulative, not because you are those things, but because those qualities exist in their own shadow and are easier to see in you than in themselves. This projection of the shadow onto another person becomes a kind of mirror. The person who secretly harbors resentment may feel deeply irritated by your presence without understanding why. Your successes might unconsciously remind them of their failures. Your kindness may irritate them because it contradicts the hardened, defensive structure they've built to protect their wounded ego. You have become a symbol, not of who you are, but of what they have not yet reconciled within themselves. Often these individuals were conditioned to suppress certain emotions, taught that envy is ugly, that anger is dangerous, that rivalry is shameful. Rather than confronting these feelings honestly, they push them into the unconscious and wear a mask of civility, even affection. But the unconscious is powerful, and it finds ways to speak through body language, tone of voice, passive-aggressive behavior, or energy shifts that can be felt, even if not logically explained. These signs are often subtle, but the intuition perceives them clearly. You may feel tension in their presence, a coldness in their praise, or a hollowness in their support. These are not random fluctuations. They are echoes of repressed emotions trying to make themselves known. It is also important to recognize that the closer the relationship, the more intense the projection can be. Intimacy lowers the walls between personas, and the unconscious begins to stir. When you are close to someone, you become a canvas for their unhealed wounds, their unmet desires, their unresolved conflicts. If they do not have the courage or self-awareness to confront their own darkness, they will begin to assign it to you. This is not because you are at fault, but because you are visible, and visibility threatens the ego's illusion of control. When someone secretly hates you, their hostility is not always about you. It is often a reflection of their own inner suffering. But unless they become conscious of this dynamic, they will continue to act out the drama, unconsciously trying to defeat the parts of you that remind them of what they've hidden in themselves. This is the great paradox of the shadow. We attack outside what we refuse to face inside. Hatred, when not acknowledged consciously, takes on masks. One of the most common and insidious masks it wears is that of passive aggression. Unlike direct hostility, which is openly expressed and thus easier to confront, passive aggression is subtle, indirect, and often cloaked in plausible deniability. It is the emotional language of those who have not yet learned how to confront their inner conflicts, or who feel that their anger must be concealed for fear of social disapproval or personal vulnerability. When someone secretly harbors resentment or hatred but cannot or will not bring these emotions into the light of day, their unconscious will seek expression through passive means. This becomes the battlefield of repressed hostility. Passive aggression is not accidental. It may manifest as sarcasm laced into a compliment or a suggestion that seems kind on the surface but carries a hidden sting. The words might say, "I'm happy for you," but the tone is flat, the eyes are cold, and the smile lacks sincerity. It is not the content of the statement that matters in such moments. It is the delivery, the energy, the subtle dissonance between words and presence. The passive-aggressive person operates through these contradictions, saying one thing while meaning another, leaving the target of their aggression to feel confused, emotionally off balance, or even guilty for picking up on something they can't quite name. In this way, passive aggression serves a dual function. On one level, it allows the person to release some of their pent-up animosity without fully owning it. They get to express hostility without taking responsibility for it. On another level, it acts as a test, a way of provoking a response without fully committing to confrontation. If you call them out, they can say, "I was only joking," or "You're too sensitive." This allows them to maintain their social mask while still feeding the darker impulses that fester beneath the surface. This form of aggression is deeply rooted in psychological repression. Often the individual learned early in life that direct expressions of anger were unsafe, or that their needs and feelings were not valid. Instead of developing a healthy relationship with emotion, they internalized the idea that anger must be disguised. Over time, this creates a distorted emotional vocabulary. They no longer know how to say what they feel directly, so they resort to indirect methods of communication, withdrawing affection, forgetting important dates, accidentally overlooking your accomplishments, or responding to your success with a comment that sounds supportive but feels like a subtle dig. The tragedy here is not just in the behavior, but in the inner suffering that gives rise to it. Passive aggression is not a conscious strategy as much as it is a symptom of unresolved inner turmoil. It is the shadow whispering through clenched teeth and tight smiles. The person who behaves this way often doesn't even realize they're doing it. They may believe they're being polite, restrained, or even supportive, but the body never lies. The unconscious finds ways to leak through, in timing, in gestures, in micro-expressions, in subtle shifts of mood when your name is mentioned or when you enter a room. To the person on the receiving end, these moments are often destabilizing. You sense something is wrong, but you can't prove it. You second-guess yourself. You may begin to wonder if you're imagining things. This confusion is precisely what makes passive aggression so effective as a defense mechanism and so harmful to relationships. It undermines trust not by breaking it openly, but by eroding it slowly, silently, through 1,000 small cuts. The person's words say one thing, their presence says another. Over time, you begin to feel that your reality is being gaslit, not in dramatic, theatrical ways, but in the smallest, most intimate exchanges. When someone secretly harbors negative feelings toward you, those feelings rarely remain silent forever. Though they may not be expressed outright, they often emerge in disguised forms, through subtle sabotage, disguised criticism, or behavior that appears supportive on the surface, but is actually laced with malice. One of the most common and dangerous expressions of concealed hostility is the act of undermining someone in disguised ways. This kind of behavior is not loud or overtly aggressive. Instead, it often appears wrapped in politeness, masked by humor, or dressed up as concern. But at its core, it reveals a deep discomfort with your presence, your success, or your inner light, a discomfort the person may not even understand consciously. When someone close to you secretly dislikes or envies you, their shadow, the unconscious part of their psyche where repressed feelings are stored, begins to view your accomplishments, your growth, or even your peace of mind as threats. Their ego, fragile and protective, may be too threatened to admit outright jealousy or insecurity, so instead, their unconscious reaches for socially acceptable tools of expression. The sarcastic joke, the backhanded compliment, the small but intentional omission of your name when listing achievements, or the casual forgetting of something that matters to you. These acts may appear harmless on the surface, but over time they reveal a pattern. Such disguised forms of negativity can be deeply confusing. You might feel that the person is on your side because they never say anything overtly cruel, yet their words often leave you feeling less than, unseen, or subtly shamed. Perhaps they frame their dismissive behavior as just teasing, or their criticism as just being honest. The language may sound benign, but the effect is corrosive. There is a particular kind of emotional erosion that comes from being undermined in ways that are not easily named or called out. This is how unconscious hostility protects itself, by operating in ambiguity, by weaponizing familiarity and closeness, by ensuring that if you confront them, you are made to feel like you're overreacting. These subtle forms of sabotage are rooted in projection. The individual who cannot accept their own feelings of inadequacy or inferiority will often project them onto those who trigger these insecurities, and in many cases that target is someone they are close to. You become, in their unconscious mind, not a friend or loved one, but a symbol of their own failure to measure up. And because this realization is intolerable to the ego, the shadow steps in and begins to act. It whispers, "Take them down a peg," but it does so with a smile, with concern, with a joke. It disguises destruction as care, which makes it all the more dangerous. Over time, these disguised attacks can wear away your self-confidence. You might begin to question yourself, to dim your light around this person, to suppress your excitement, or downplay your success so as not to invite another one of their clever remarks. This is the true cost of being undermined by someone who claims to care. You begin to adjust your behavior not to protect your joy, but to avoid their discomfort. And in doing so, you sacrifice something essential: your authenticity. Disguised undermining is not just about what is said or done. It is about the intent that hides behind it. It is a form of emotional manipulation carried out not with cruelty, but with calculation. And while it may never rise to the level of overt betrayal, its effect can be just as damaging, if not more so, because it erodes from within, quietly, with a smile. Emotional distance is not always caused by time or circumstance. Sometimes it emerges quietly, without warning, and for reasons we cannot immediately name. When someone close to you secretly harbors negative feelings, resentment, envy, or deep-seated dislike, they often begin to withdraw emotionally, not out of indifference, but as a form of unconscious self-protection. This withdrawal is not always physical. The person may still be around you, still speak with you, still maintain the rhythm of interaction, but the emotional texture of the relationship changes. The warmth fades, the presence becomes hollow. The conversations that once flowed effortlessly begin to feel forced. What has changed is not necessarily the content of the relationship, but its soul. This kind of distance often arises from internal conflict. The person may be unable or unwilling to reconcile their feelings about you. especially if those feelings contradict the role they are supposed to play in your life. Perhaps they are a friend, a partner, a sibling, or a colleague who is expected to support you, encourage you, and share in your joys. But inside, something has shifted. They feel overshadowed by you, or judged by your growth, or reminded of their own unmet potential whenever you speak about your dreams. And yet, because they have not confronted these feelings, they cannot name them. Instead, they begin to pull away without explanation. The psyche, when faced with a truth it does not want to accept, often resorts to avoidance. Avoidance becomes a shield, not to protect you, but to protect the other from having to face what they feel. Emotional distance, then, is a symptom of this avoidance. It is the soul's way of saying, I cannot face you because I cannot face what you stir in me. But because the withdrawal is subtle and not openly discussed, it leads to confusion. You may start to question what you did wrong. You may wonder why your calls go unanswered a little longer than usual, why your messages are read but not replied to, why your presence seems to evoke discomfort rather than connection. This emotional absence is a form of silent hostility. It may not carry the sting of an argument, but it conveys something even more painful, a lack of emotional engagement. When someone once close to you becomes emotionally distant, it can feel like speaking into a void. The connection becomes performative. Their laughter feels rehearsed. Their interest seems forced. And in the quiet moments, you sense they are somewhere else. Not physically, but emotionally, psychologically, even spiritually. This kind of absence is the shadow's way of retreating when it feels exposed. The person who harbors hidden animosity is often unaware of the full extent of their emotional detachment. They may justify their distance with reasons that feel rational, being busy, needing space, feeling tired. But beneath these explanations is something more difficult to admit, a dissonance between who they want to be in your life and what they actually feel. This dissonance creates discomfort, and the easiest way to soothe it is to withdraw, to disconnect, to slowly reduce emotional intimacy while preserving the appearance of the relationship. Emotional distance can also become a passive form of control. By withholding warmth or presence, the person can maintain a sense of power, a sense of superiority, or at the very least, a barrier between their vulnerability and yours. If they were to stay connected, they might be forced to confront what they feel, and they might even have to explain themselves. So, instead, they vanish gradually, piece by piece, leaving behind a version of themselves that is polite, responsive, but not truly present. You find yourself in the company of a ghost, someone who once cared or pretended to, but whose heart has taken leave long before the body follows. In any relationship, the dynamics between two individuals are rarely as straightforward as they appear on the surface. People are complex beings, driven by both conscious intentions and unconscious impulses, and this complexity often reveals itself in inconsistent behavior. One of the most confusing and subtle signs that someone close to you secretly harbors negative feelings toward you is their erratic or unpredictable behavior. This inconsistency is not just a quirk of personality, it is a reflection of internal conflict, a clash between the public persona and the hidden emotional landscape that the individual is unwilling or unable to confront. When someone secretly resents you or feels threatened by your presence, their feelings often manifest in this emotional instability. On the surface, they may appear warm and engaging one moment and cold or dismissive the next. Their behavior may swing from expressions of affection and admiration to criticism and distance, often without any clear reason or warning. This inconsistency is unsettling, not just because it disrupts the flow of the relationship, but because it speaks to a deeper, unconscious struggle within the person. They are torn between the part of themselves that wants to maintain the relationship the part that values your presence or feels a sense of obligation, and the part that harbors unacknowledged hostility or jealousy. The erratic behavior occurs when the individual's shadow, the hidden parts of their psyche containing the emotions and impulses they are unable or unwilling to face, rises to the surface. These unconscious feelings of envy, insecurity, or resentment create an inner tension. On one hand, the individual's conscious mind may try to present a mask of warmth, kindness, or even affection, because this is what the persona, their outward image, dictates. However, the shadow side of the self, which carries all the suppressed emotions, is in direct opposition to this public face. It resists the idea of full emotional investment, because to do so would mean confronting the discomfort and vulnerability they feel in the presence of your success, your joy, or your peace of mind. The inconsistency often stems from the fact that these emotions, the jealousy, the resentment, the unspoken judgment, are not consciously acknowledged. They are buried, hidden, and yet they cannot be fully suppressed. They manifest in the form of emotional swings that confuse the person on the receiving end. One day they might receive compliments or positive attention from the individual, only to find that the next day they are met with cold indifference or harsh criticism. This unpredictability is not just a reflection of mood swings. It is a manifestation of the inner turmoil of someone whose feelings have become fragmented. Their shadow is not integrated into their conscious self, and because of this dissonance, their behavior toward you is like a mirror fractured into pieces. Some moments reflect warmth, while others reflect coldness, and the person may not even understand why they are shifting in this way. For the individual harboring these hidden feelings, this inconsistency can be a defense mechanism. It allows them to protect their own ego by keeping you at a distance, even if that distance is emotional. When someone feels threatened by you, especially when they cannot confront the root of that threat within themselves, they may begin to alternate between drawing you closer and pushing you away. It is an unconscious attempt to maintain control over the relationship, to maintain a sense of power. The erratic behavior is a way to keep you guessing, to prevent you from becoming too comfortable or too confident in your connection with them. It is as though their subconscious mind is saying, "You are too much of a threat to my sense of stability, so I will not allow myself to fully engage." On the receiving end, this behavior can be deeply disorienting. You may begin to question your own actions or wonder if you've somehow triggered the person's shifting moods. This creates an atmosphere of uncertainty, where you are unsure of where you stand with them from one moment to the next. You may start to feel emotionally drained or confused, as the push-pull dynamic forces you to constantly adjust your expectations and reactions. This is precisely what makes inconsistent behavior so destabilizing. It forces you to adapt to an ever-changing emotional landscape, leaving you unsure of where you truly fit into the other person's world. This inconsistency is not only a product of internal emotional conflict, but also of a deeper unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The person may never fully recognize the jealousy or resentment they feel toward you, and as a result, their actions become a chaotic dance between what they wish to express and what they are subconsciously trying to suppress. The result is a disjointed and emotionally taxing interaction, one that leaves the recipient uncertain, off balance, and ultimately isolated. One of the most telling signs that someone close to you secretly harbors negative feelings toward you is their tendency to belittle your achievements, dismiss your contributions, or minimize your successes. This behavior often emerges when someone feels threatened by what you represent, your growth, your accomplishments, or the qualities they perceive as lacking in themselves. The individual may not even be fully aware of the source of their resentment, yet their actions will speak louder than their words. Rather than celebrating your triumphs, they find subtle ways to downplay or trivialize them, often cloaked in sarcasm, humor, or false humility. This phenomenon occurs when a person's sense of self-worth is fragile or threatened by the success of those around them. Rather than feeling inspired or motivated by your achievements, they experience an emotional wound, as if your success somehow highlights their own perceived failures or inadequacies. But because acknowledging this feeling directly would require them to confront their own vulnerabilities, they resort to diminishing your accomplishments as a way to preserve their own fragile sense of self-esteem. This kind of behavior often operates under the radar, appearing innocuous to others but deeply cutting to the one on the receiving end. When someone belittles your achievements, they are not simply commenting on the objective reality of your actions. Instead, they are projecting their own feelings of inferiority or inadequacy onto you. They may say something like, "That wasn't really a big deal," or "Anyone could have done that." On the surface, these remarks may seem like harmless comments or offhand jokes. However, beneath the surface lies a deep-seated discomfort with your success. The person may feel that your achievement shines a light on their own perceived shortcomings, making them feel less than in comparison. In their mind, the only way to deal with this discomfort is to diminish what you've done, to make it seem insignificant or unworthy of celebration. This behavior is rooted in the person's unconscious envy. Envy is a powerful emotion that arises when someone feels that another has something they lack, whether it's talent, beauty, success, or even happiness. Rather than confronting their envy and using it as motivation to grow, the individual projects their negative feelings outward. They may not even fully recognize that their dismissal of your accomplishments is rooted in their own jealousy. Instead, they may rationalize their behavior by convincing themselves that your success isn't all that impressive, that you don't deserve the praise, or that your achievements are somehow flawed. This allows them to feel superior by comparison, even though deep down, they are only masking their own insecurity. Belittling your accomplishments is also a way to create emotional distance. When someone cannot bear to truly acknowledge your growth or success, they find it easier to diminish it. If they were to celebrate you fully, they would have to confront their own feelings of inadequacy, and this is often too painful for them. Instead, they push you away by minimizing your victories, subtly reminding you that your accomplishments are not as meaningful as you might think. Over time, this kind of behavior can chip away at your self-esteem, making you question whether your success is as significant as you believed. The more you hear your achievements dismissed or downplayed, the more you may start to internalize the message that perhaps you don't deserve them after all. What makes this behavior particularly insidious is the way it can be disguised. The person may act as if they are merely being realistic or humble, hiding their feelings of envy behind a mask of objectivity. They may frame their belittling comments as helpful criticism or downplay their negative remarks by wrapping them in humor. But the underlying intent is clear: to deflate your sense of accomplishment, to keep you from growing too much, and to remind you, even in the smallest, subtlest ways, that you are not as important, successful, or worthy of praise as you might think. At its core, the belittling of your achievements is a defense mechanism. The individual who engages in this behavior is struggling with their own internal sense of inferiority and feels that they must protect themselves by diminishing others. Their unconscious need to preserve their own sense of self-worth leads them to act in ways that undermine yours. But because this behavior is often passive-aggressive and masked by a veneer of politeness, it can be difficult to confront. The person may not even realize the extent of the harm they are causing, as they are so deeply invested in protecting their own fragile ego that they cannot see the impact of their words and actions on you. Over time, being on the receiving end of such behavior can be draining. The constant undermining of your achievements can leave you feeling invisible, unworthy, or disrespected. You may begin to question whether you are indeed deserving of your success, or whether the person's words are telling you something you should internalize. The long-term effect of this behavior is not just emotional hurt, but a slow erosion of trust and confidence in the relationship itself. In relationships, the masks we wear are not always easy to see through, but when someone close to you secretly harbors negative feelings, those feelings often seep into their behavior in subtle yet powerful ways. From belittling your achievements and undermining your success, to withdrawing emotionally and expressing erratic, unpredictable moods, these signs, though often disguised, reveal deeper emotional dynamics that should not be ignored. It's essential to recognize these hidden patterns early, not just to protect yourself, but to preserve the integrity of your emotional well-being. At the end of the day, the people closest to us hold immense power over our lives, for better or for worse. Understanding these signs allows us to navigate these complex relationships with greater awareness and wisdom, and, perhaps, to decide whether it is time to confront the truth or distance ourselves from the toxicity that might be present in the shadows. To preserve the integrity of your emotional well-being. At the end of the day, the people closest to us hold immense power over our lives, for better or for worse. Understanding these signs allows us to navigate these complex relationships with greater awareness and wisdom, and perhaps to decide whether it is time to confront the truth or distance ourselves from the toxicity that might be present in the shadows.